Hey everybody, I'm David. Today I'll show you how to install Docker in rootless mode on Ubuntu. On the left hand side, you can see Ubuntu 24.04 minimal install terminal, and on the right hand side is my notes so that it's easier for everybody to follow. Now I'll be honest, for what we are doing today, rootless won't feel any different. Everything works the same. So why bother setting up Docker? Now imagine this. A developer run a container with a host mount, maybe slash var or slash. User then use the container, happily run some rm-rf to do cleanup files, and accidentally deletes critical system files. And just like that, the whole system will just go down. So with Docker, the container can't touch the system file. So the damage, even when the user perform rm-rf, will be very contained. At most, the container dies, but the system lives. Now think of it like this. A seatbelt, technically you don't really need it until you do. So for today's session, we'll be installing Docker CE, set up rootless, and run the Docker container to verify that the container is running in rootless mode. You won't see how rootless matters yet, but it is always better to start good habit early. The whole videos will probably take like 5 to 10 minutes, so this will be a short one. Let's get started. Now I'm starting from a freshly installed Ubuntu 24.04. So technically, I will need to perform this step. But if you have installed Docker before from Ubuntu default repository, you might have the old Docker IO package. We want to remove that, and because you are going to be installing from Docker official repository, it is going to be more updated and generally better maintained. So let's start by cleaning up any old Docker packages. Let's run this. Right, so these are the list of all the Docker image that you'll probably find in the old system. Right, so if you have it, you'll just get removed. Now, don't worry too much that you are going to lose your containers or images because this will only remove the packages. Your images and containers are safe. They are going to be stored separately in a valid Docker. This will give us a clean starting point before we install Docker from the official repository. Now, next, let's add Docker official repository. This is where Docker publishes the latest stable releases. Think of it like this. Ubuntu packages are tested and stable, but often months old. Docker repo has the latest features and security patches, so that's what we want. Now first, let's update apt and install the prerequisite. Right, I'm going to install the CA certificates, curl, and vim as well because these are the tools that I generally use. So let's get this done. Right. After that, we are going to create a keyring directory. And I'm going to download the Docker's GPG key, right, and store it in the directory that is just created earlier. After that, we need to actually make sure that the key itself is actually readable by all the users. Right. So there's that. Now the next part is basically we need to create the Docker source file and key this content in. Right. If you are using other version of Ubuntu, 22.04 or 20.04, you can actually use Jammy or Focal itself noble. Now, you don't really need to use Vim if you are comfortable with any other editors. You can just do it, use it, right? Whatever works for you. Right. So let's update the apt again. Right. Yeah, you can see here we have the download docker.com. So this means the repository is basically ready for us to use. Now the next step, we want to install all the Docker CE. Okay, this might take a while. So let's go through what are some of this all about. So the Docker CE is actually the daemon itself. So that these are the one that is going to be running your containers, right? The CLI will be the one that you use, basically all the commands that is available for Docker, right? Container DIO, this should be the low-level container runtime. Docker is actually calling this under the hood, right? The next part is basically Docker build X plugins. This is for Docker to perform the Docker build, right? The last part is basically the Docker Compose plugin, right? This Docker Compose plugin is the new Docker Compose command, right? The old version is actually using a Docker Compose with hyphen. This is actually a Python script. So the new one is actually a lot better. It is a standalone tools that is built into Docker. So this will be very fast and definitely a lot more reliable. Right. Now let's make sure the installation is completed properly. So what we want to do is basically we want to do the Docker version. Let's do that. Docker version. Yeah. And we want to make sure that Docker compose without the hyphen here. Right. Run the version. Yeah. So now we have both Docker and Docker compose running. Right. Now let's check what we have for the context. Right. So currently it is basically running the default one. The default is actually based on the root full Docker. Right. So if I do Docker context show, right, it is actually using the default now. Now, after we install the rootless, we should see the new rootless context. So let's get into it. Right. So the prerequisite for the rootless Docker, they'll need uidmap and dbus user session. So we are going to install this. Now, what does this do actually? So the uidmap is basically a Linux security features that rootless Docker really depends on. In a simple terms, it tricks the processes into thinking that they are running as root when they are actually running as your user. The other one is basically the Docker dbus user session. So the dbus user session is how the application talk to the systemd. For rootless Docker to start automatically at boot, it will need the dbus setup for your user session. Without this, rootless Docker either won't work or won't start at all at boot. Even if you already have it installed before, you can just run it because apt will just tell you it is already installed if you have installed it before. Now let's go to the next part. This is the most important part, right? We are going to set up the rootless set up. Now, first, we need to make sure that the Docker daemon is not running. So let's stop it, right? Yeah. The disable now is basically the part that stops the Docker services immediately, right? The disable will actually disable it from starting from boot. Now we are doing this because Rootless Docker runs on its own daemon under later on Rootless Docker will be running its own daemon under your user account. So it is always a good habit to stop the services that we don't need. Right. Now that the root Docker is not running anymore, we can set up the Rootless Docker. So let's run the install. Yep, you want to go through and make sure there is no errors here. All looks good. Okay, now we are going to enable it as users. It's the same thing. So the enable will actually enable it on boot time, right? Then that's now actually will actually start it now as well. Okay, let me repeat that. Actually, enable will not run it at boot time because what happened is all the systemctl things that you run under the user script will only run once you log in. So actually, we still need one more steps to actually make it run on boot time, right? So there is the process is called linger, right? So we have enabled it now. So we are going to enable the linger, right? Copy, paste. Right, so this is admin, right? Yeah. So this will be the last sudo that you will need. After this, everything else will be running rootless, right? So now after this is set up, let's check the context, docker context ls, right? You can see that we still have two contexts. One is the default, the other one is rootless, but currently context show, you realize that we're actually using the rootless context. Okay, so that's it. You are now running Docker in rootless mode. No sudo, no system daemon. Everything will be running entirely under your user account. Now let's verify that it works. This is the most satisfying part where we'll see all come together. Instead of the usual hello world, let me show you why Docker matters. I have a JSON file here. It is not exactly very human readable. Right. So normally we have to install JQ to parse it. But with the Dockers, the tools comes with the containers. So what we need to do is basically we just need to cat the sample.json, right? Then I'm going to run the Docker containers and run JQ. This is how it looks. Oh, okay, so this is actually inside GitHub. So I'm going to, yeah, right. So if I want to see the skills, I can just put .skills, right? So I'll get the skills appear, right? Yeah, just to show you guys that I don't play trick here, I'll just run the JQ. JQ commands actually doesn't exist locally. So everything runs from container, right? No installation, no sudo. If the same command, whether you're running on Ubuntu, browse, SUSE, or any operating system with Dockers. But is it rootless? So let's check, right? So we do context show, right? you'll see that it is actually rootless. We can actually check the Docker directory. Right, you'll see that now it's actually using the home directory here. Right, we can also see the Docker info. Right, the context is rootless, it is running rootless. Yeah. The last one, we can do the systemctl user status Docker. Right, you can see that it is actually running enabled. Right. Yeah, of course, optionally, if you still want to do your Docker hello world, we can do that as well. Let's just quickly do this. Right, it'll tell you hello Docker. They'll tell you that the installation appears to work properly. Right. Now, don't worry too much about all the comments that I type. If you can't, you don't want to type it, I'll just put it somewhere in the description later on. So you can always catch up later and copy paste as well and do what I did today. Now, what we have covered today. Let's recap. Today, we actually covered why rootless Docker matters. It is basically for security with no root access. We remove all packages, then install the packages from Docker's repository. We went through the rootless setup process and what each step does. And then we switched to rootless context and verified that it works. Now, before you go, these are the few things to remember. Rootless means your containers can't touch the file system, the system files. That is a lot more secure. You switch from default to rootless context, lingering, let the Docker runs and starts at boot, right? Then we are moving our data to actually local share Dockers instead of running from valid Docker. Right? Hopefully this session has been helpful. Hit subscribe for more Docker tutorial. I'll try to upload every 2 weeks. In the next video, we'll play with Nginx, PostgreSQL containers or whatever containers in rootless Docker, and we'll go through some of the container operations. If you do have questions, do drop them in comments. I'll try to read and reply to all of them. If you want to go deeper, my book Leveling Up with Docker covers everything in this video plus 13 more chapters with practice. Right? We cover volumes, networking, Docker Compose, private registry, and more. And we also cover how to deploy it in production. Link in the description. So see you all next time. Bye bye.